So, you've had an engine problem earlier in your flight, which you successfully dealt with, and you've shut down the right-hand engine. You've gently descended back towards your home airport, and you've given yourself some time to get over the stress of the upcoming single-engine approach. It's a nice day, and so you expect this to be about as straightforward as any single-engine landing can be. You're lined up on final, but all of a sudden, someone pulls out onto the runway in front of you, and you decide the safest option is to go around and try again. So let's look at how to fly this single-engine go-around. In this video, we're going to look at the single-engine go-around in a multi-engine piston aeroplane. So the student here is flying a pretty nice, stable, single-engine approach towards the runway, but we're simulating that someone's pulled onto the runway in front of them and they've chosen to go around. The order of actions for a single-engine go-around are to first apply full power on the live engine with simultaneous rudder to prevent any yaw. Then, without waiting for a positive rate of climb, you're going to retract the gear and the flaps. Now that you've gotten rid of that drag, the aircraft will actually be capable of establishing a positive rate of climb on one engine, so you're going to pitch to maintain VYSE, which is your blue line on your airspeed indicator. So that was a reasonably well-flown single-engine go-around, with all the actions completed and a climb established at a safe airspeed. But as always, there's a few things that could have been improved. So let's jump back to before the go-around and have a bit of a closer look at each of those steps. This approach was looking nice and stable. The student has completed their final approach checks, they're correcting nicely, and the go-around was only initiated for training purposes. So just before the student adds power, you can see the runway is slightly to the right of the magnetic compass, which is in the center of the instrument panel. As they add full power on the left engine, you can see the nose yaws to the right, and the runway has moved to the other side of the compass. This tells us that as they move the left throttle from a low approach power setting all the way up to full power, they haven't used enough rudder to counteract the yaw. However, they have controlled the pitch attitude nicely, and initially, while the gear and flaps are still extended, they've simply leveled off, which means they've maintained a safe airspeed throughout. One common error that people make with the single-engine go-around is pitching up and establishing the aircraft in a climbing attitude before they've retracted the gear and the flaps. If a single-engine climb attitude is established while the gear and flaps are still extended, there's simply not enough power to overcome the drag, and airspeed will reduce rapidly. Next, they've retracted the flaps and the gear, and again you can see the student has maintained a sensible pitch attitude while they're retracting, which means they've maintained a safe airspeed and positive control of the aircraft at all times. Now that gear and flaps have been retracted, a slightly higher pitch attitude can be selected which will maintain VYSE and establish the aircraft in a single-engine climb. The last thing that needs to be done is for a radio call to be made, informing air traffic control that you're going around. Here, you can see the student has put their left thumb on the transmit button and is making their radio call to ATC before they've stabilized in a climb and while they're still only at about 200 feet. There's no need to make the radio call this early. It would be better to focus on flying the aircraft, keeping it in balance and maintaining a sensible pitch attitude that results in blue line airspeed and a stable climb with the aircraft in trim before you worry about making a call to ATC. Overall, though, I was quite happy with the way this student flew the single-engine go-around, especially since this was their first single-engine go-around at low altitude in the circuit, after practicing them at a higher altitude on the previous flight. They've flown the maneuvers safely by maintaining control of the aircraft and establishing a positive rate of climb. Although there were a few improvements that could have been made, if they flew a single-engine go-around like this on their multi-engine skills test, I have no doubt that they would pass.